Hey, this is Richie.
Hey
Hi.
everyone, I'm June from Chicago.
Hey, how you doing? I'm from California, Roberto Sandoval.
I'm Felicia Williams from Maryland.
Hey, we're all interpreters. We're here to talk about interpreting, especially deaf interpreters. We're not talking about hearing interpreters today. We're talking about deaf interpreters today. We're talking about the different roles that deaf interpreters take in the community, certified deaf interpreters, and deaf interpreters in general. If they're not certified, is that the same thing? So we're going to talk about all those things.
June here. Yeah, so what is the difference between a CDI and a DI? Is there a difference?
Obviously, this is the certification. This is Felicia. So one's certified and one's not certified.
Richie here. So both actually do pretty much the same work, right? Pretty much, except certified deaf interpreters means that they have a way to track them or the work that they do, make sure that it's appropriate, that they're following ethics, and so forth. And so they are certified. If they don't follow the ethics, they could lose or get their certification revoked, whereas DIs can't.
That's right. There is a risk, though, you take with being a certified deaf interpreter, right? So if you're not certified, then you can get sued. There's liability. So there's definitely a risk that's within that, right? If you're not certified.
June here. So if you're not certified, I do encourage you to do that. I mean, all deaf people, I work, I'm still deaf. I still need interpreters for myself. I need a hearing interpreter. I want a hearing interpreter. I want them certified. And now, as a worker, I want deaf people to, or the community at large, to see me as a good interpreter and therefore certified. So I think it is really important that people get certified.
This is Roberto. I agree with June. Absolutely. I'm a deaf interpreter, and I think the most important thing is to know my limitations. For example, I'm not going to work in a tort room in medical because I don't want to take that risk. I think the most important thing is to make sure that you have the training that you need. And of course, my goal is to become certified, but you know where you're going to work with and make sure you limit yourself within those environments.
Felicia here. Yeah, same here. I'm a deaf interpreter. You don't, if I'm going to court, I want to have the skills. I don't want, because there is accountability there. I won't interpret in a courtroom. I don't have that skill set. Live in person where they're relying on me to communicate, what if I mess up? And that's such a high risk. I don't know that I want to take because of the skills that I have right now. I might take training, go to workshops, become certified, and be recognized as someone who can interpret in the courts. Then I would do it.
This is Richie. So one of the things that I think about is when I'm in courts, I know a lot of people think that they don't want the liabilities, but at the same time, having an interpreter who's going into the IEPs, and actually, when you document your information on the IEP, that's legal information. So you may think court and IEPs are different, or if you're going to any other services in the community, maybe let's say you're discussing anything with any information that's going on, and that could be a legal situation if anything goes awry. So avoiding courts, but not avoiding other situations, you got to think like many situations can turn out to be legal as well.
June here, that is so true. Roberto, like the IEP, Social Security Office, we're culture mediators. We have to have that skill to be able to work with those who don't necessarily have the language that we use to not dominantly here. So, and in court, and there is such a huge risk there, especially when it's documented.
That's right. This is June say that I think what we're talking about is all jobs, any job that we're going to be taking, regardless whether it's something that's not a high risk or something that's high risk, they all are going to incorporate risk, regardless of what kind of job that we're taking. So we can
100%.
talk about medical, we can talk about academic, we can talk about conferences, we can talk about counseling, working with the park department, anything. There's going to be risk involved at any level, and there's going to be different levels of risk that are going to be involved in what we take.
Oh, Felicia. Roberto here. I do want to remind you, yeah, the risk is there, and it varies um, depending on the situation. And if you're not qualified, don't take that job. Don't take that job if you're not qualified to interpret it.
Lisa, that's right. This is Felicia. Absolutely. Yeah.
Richard here. I think risks are what we need to be talking about. how do we reduce the risk? And that requires training and learning and, reading up and doing our research and building your elk, your skills, and making sure that's the best way to do it. People assume once you're certified, that's it. I can stop studying. I don't have to work on improving myself. But no, it's an ongoing effort. It's a big part of our professional development and our career.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is Roberta. I strongly encourage after the assignment to have a post team meeting to talk with the hearing interpreter and the deaf interpreter and to talk about what's going on and talk about what happened within the assignment.
Felicia here. Yeah, like we were talking about, and before pre-meeting, post-meeting, and making decisions and finding out where we went wrong. Talking about, in the pre-conference, figuring, oh, I might not be the best match, and for example, if I'm signing something and I need to go into, a role shift, I come out of my role to talk about something or get a feed or something. There's a certain cue that I give somebody who can give me that to make my interpretation better. It's how do I do that? Do I pause the interaction to deal with my issues or what? My team is there to feed me and support me and that's before. So afterwards I get that feedback with my team and I realize, okay, I don't have the skills or I do, and how I can improve, maybe gesturing for this scenario. And once I'm done and giving, sometimes I might need to go consecutive versus simultaneous, and getting that feedback is really important. So if we don't pre-conference, how can we sort of work with each other and make sure that, if my team has the skills or they don't have the skills, we need to know that and identify that before. So I think it is really important to meet before and after.
Yeah, this is June. One thing I've always said, I feel fortunate that as a deaf interpreter, I'm always partnered with a hearing interpreter. So I have a hearing team, which means I never am alone on the job. That I always, I don't have to make all the decisions on my own. I don't have to think if I'm right or wrong or anything. Sometimes with that job, it's extremely hard. As an interpreter, it may be, it may be really hard for me because I really understand what the deaf person is going through. But as a team with a hearing interpreter, we're working together. And that sense of, I have someone else there. I'm not here alone, that I'm working with another hearing interpreter. And at the end of the day, when they go home, as a deaf person or a hearing person, of course, you have to be confidential regardless of any job that you're working with as an interpreter, as a hearing interpreter, deaf interpreter, you have to keep the confidentiality. But when you're there on a team together, you can discuss the job. And that's certainly an attribute that's positive about working together as the team.
Ritchie here. Yeah, regarding confidentiality, people are a little bit afraid of that because, deaf people, we're in the deaf world, right? And it's a small community. And me as a deaf interpreter, I try to let go of that and work and let go of my work when I'm done. And a deaf person, if they come up to me afterwards and they're like, oh, I saw you there, and I'll sort of play the idiot and play like I wasn't there. But really, the deaf community needs to trust me as a deaf interpreter. They need to trust me. And so therefore they call me when they need me. And also recognize when I enter their space, it's their space for a vulnerable moment to do what they need to do and make sure that I show that I respect their space.
Yeah, this is June. Sometimes I know who another deaf person is when I'm working with them. And of course, there's no judgment when I go into the assignment. There's trust 100%, and I have 100% confidentiality. I understand that situation. I know my job. And of course, I tell them that I'm going to be confidential with the job. The community is not going to know what's going on. And I think this is the most important thing is there's not going to be no judgment between what's going on regarding whether it's an intellectual person or not, or what's going on. If a deaf person needs a CDI, there's no question. There's no judgment. There's nothing going on. You're not thinking about the past or anything like that. You're not thinking about why they're needing a CDI or the reasons why. It is not because that they need a CDI because of any intellectual issues or anything like that. We have the same signs. We are, it's something that when you see another person sign that's deaf, you just feel like, you know what I mean? Like I could trust that person regardless of what the context is, I can go in. And that's really what it's all about. So that's why it's nothing to do with intellectual capability. If it was me in the hospital, to be honest, I would hope to have a CDI there too. And at the end of the day, because I'm laid up and I need someone that's going to be able to catch all the information, me as a CDI would want a CDI in that type of environment. It's the same thing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Richie here. Yeah, I agree. Like in a hospital, if I'm in pain and I'm crying, I'm emotional, I would just want to hold and make sure that the hearing interpreter understands me. I have to like, layer upon layer, taking away from what I really need to focus on and making sure that my communication's there. But if I have a CDI, it really does help everything. It makes everything move smoothly. The point is, it's a
Mm-hmm.
team effort, right? It's not about hearing people being better than deaf people or vice versa. It's just making sure that communication is there.
Mm-hmm. That's
It's a
right.
team effort.
Yeah, this is Felicia. So I know I've never thought about really, going to school for deaf and anything. With the interpreters that I've had, I've always had a hearing interpreter. And that's always what I've been acclimated with. And then I saw a deaf interpreter and I was thinking, what's that? I remember the first time I didn't want a deaf interpreter. It's like, I don't need a deaf interpreter. I'm used to having hearing interpreters and that's it. And then I finally was able to see what they could do. And I thought, I realized, no, I prefer having a deaf interpreter, even in a classroom. I would catch signs that I wanted to learn. I would learn different signs that I can incorporate in my own signs. There was different signs that I knew that I was making mistakes with, and a deaf interpreter would expand on concepts. They would help me with vocabulary, and those skills that I learned with a deaf interpreter actually made me more comfortable with signing because I was able to see that with a deaf interpreter, and I wasn't focused on a hearing interpreter or the teacher. It's because a deaf interpreter has the same culture, and so we could definitely incorporate that same cultural awareness with that. So a CDI or a DI, regardless of any field, anywhere, it should be included in that.
Roberto here. Yeah, like for example, communication, yes, we rely on cultural aspects, right? We have to make sure that like if all deaf people are at a restaurant, right, and talking, and then like I'm the only one speaking Spanish and everyone else is white, and I'm like gesturing with people and trying to take orders and make sure that I'm getting everything right, right? Actually, I can do that because I'm a cultural mediator in that scenario.
That's right. This is Richie. One important thing that I think we all have to keep in mind is that regardless of deaf and hearing interpreters, I think there's a lot more aspects that we have to look at is when we look at deaf and hearing team interpreters, and we also have to look at deaf blind interpreters, or we have to look at the room if there's a deaf and deaf team interpreter, or if the deaf interpreter is working alone, certainly, if they're using text. So there's a broad range of how you're working as an interpreter. So you're not only talking about symposiums, or you're not only talking about getting in front of the group, you're also talking about copy signing, you're also talking about different styles and modes of interpreting. So certainly those are the different ways that we can do our job.
I've noticed with COVID, with BLM, I've noticed more and more deaf interpreters popping up on the TVs, which is such a breath of fresh air. I mean, I just get it. I just know what's going on. As a deaf person, I'm like, yes, this is so great. It's so nice. And really, the context is there. It just fills in the information that has been missing. And, they do need the training. And I expect them, like the same thing as a hearing person, to go to school and increase their expectations. I have those same expectations for a deaf interpreter. And, I want that
Yes.
visibility, and they are more visible, and I love that.
Yes, this is Felicia. I know you're talking about definitely the interpreters expanding. And I really hope that interpreters are, there's deaf educators as well that are teaching in IDPs. I think it's really important. I know a lot of the students who are deaf who are really eager and they want to become interpreters, but there's not enough deaf teachers. And so it's really hard to find out there. And we definitely need deaf teachers in the interpreting profession. So my hope is that that pool increases. There's a lot more deaf and professors that are teaching interpreters. And that way we can get more deaf interpreters out there. So we certainly need to increase those numbers out there. We need to get deaf interpreters out there. So we think about that, but we want more deaf interpreters, but we forget about the interpreting programs. So we definitely need to start with the teachers out there.
June here. I know that some people think, oh, CDI, I don't get it. Like I've never had one before, but people think think about food. You're getting new food, you've never tasted it before. Just try it once and you're like, oh, I like it. And then you might take another bite or of something else and you don't like it, or you taste something else and you love it again. It's the same thing. You might have a great relationship with one deaf interpreter, or not. And then another deaf interpreter, might be a better fit for you. where you
Mhm.
get each other. And that's totally fine. Just try it one time and try another time. Just keep trying.
Yes, this is Felicia. I know the mentorship, when you think about that, that's really important. It's an important aspect to have the mentorship and support that's going through it. I didn't have any mentors. There weren't enough mentors that were able to work with me for a long time, especially Black deaf mentors. As a Black deaf person, I was thinking about how I can find more Black deaf females that were out there that were able to mentor me. And I was really waiting for a long time. And I was wondering how I could grow in this profession. And I did meet someone else who was an interpreter too. And we definitely advocated for each other and supported each other. But it was just us two. And that's the thing, we didn't have a lot of other people. So I'm hoping that in our field, there's going to be people that see this presentation and they're going to be realizing that, you know what, no, let's go ahead and try this, and maybe there's, even if they're working theater or medical or something like that, they could just try something like that because we need to see what people's passion is. My passion is I love medical. I love theater. I love translating. For me, that's huge. That's just something that I love to do. And just, you got to try it before you realize what your calling is and what really your passion is. So I want to see more BIPOC interpreters, and I want to see the profession grow in the BIPOC field. And I want to see more people working together to make this happen.
Rich.
Yeah, especially with the interpreter field. If we need people that are going to be able to think about hearing interpreters who are not able to code switch to match what different cultures are like. So we definitely need people to represent different cultures and different communities.
Richie here, and regarding BIPOC, I think there's a really important story here. So now let's start thinking about this. So why don't we have deaf bilingual interpreters? LSM, ASL to English, why not? Get more and more different teams, not only LSM, but also Russian individuals who are moving here, immigrants who are moving here. They would rather have somebody, a deaf interpreter, who can sign their home sign language, right? Rather than gesturing. Gesturing is fine sometimes, but you might need to look for somebody who, sorry, my sign is degrading. It's been a long day today.
I need a CDI. This is June.
I do. We can always, it's always best to match their language, right? It's more authentic, and communication is more successful in that scenario. People often think, oh, bilingual is only hearing and deaf, but no, you can have a deaf interpreter. We need to widen our interpreter field.
Yeah, this is Roberto. I know we're talking about trilingual interpreters. I think we have to really think that they're using 3 languages within the different rooms that we're interpreting with. It's not only 2 languages that we have to consider. So if it's trilingual, so if we're thinking ASL, English, and LSM, it could be something where there's a translation aspect where you have to read and interpret. So that's something that we have to think about. And are you thinking about deafblind people that are able to do that? So that's certainly protactile ASL is something that we really have to think about. And so we're thinking about protactile, or if we're thinking about another language, then we're just going to look in that language and we're going, no, wait, that's something I need to consider, is we have to think about the deafblind interpreters. And so we're working within all of those modalities to make sure that communication is being facilitated. And I think that we really need to train people that it's not only Spanish, or it's not only LSM, it's not only trilingual interpreting. There's a lot of different aspects of that. So for example, in Russia, in New York City, there's a huge Russian population over there. And so, or there's a lot of Cuban different sign language in Florida that we have to think about. And so we have to think about the Cuban population as well. Yes. And I think it would be nice. I think it's time that we emphasize ownership for deaf interpreters. And what this means is that we need to develop our own deaf interpreting, how we process the information. We're relying on hearing people to come up with how they've processed all the information and what their processing looks like. But we haven't really developed our own way that we process the information, what we process regarding the message in our own processing models. And we haven't published that as well. So I'm definitely looking forward to a time where we're able to do that.
This is June here. I know that a lot of people want to become certified. The passion is there. Some people like us here see them, but you have to meet us halfway. We can't do all of the work, right? I'm not the only one. I'm not going to be taking the test
Mhm.
for them. I'm not going to be taking the test for you. I can give you mentorship, resources. I can tell you how to do this job. I can give you resources to study, but you have to do the work. If you say, "Oh, I can't do English," but really, English, hearing people, they know English and they have to learn a second language, but they delve into the deaf world and then they take a test to become interpreters, right? The same thing with deaf people. They can get a mentor to teach them English or work on their English skills if that's where they're feeling weak. But then they can go in and take the test and then move on from there. Often with jobs, they're hearing people who think, okay, I have to move the language from the source to the target, and I have to flip flop it and do all of that work, right? That's the hearing thinking. That's the hearing approach. And so the deaf people might approach it differently, but go for it. If you're struggling with English, get a tutor, get help with English. With the hearing people do that. Why don't the deaf people do that? And that's my 2 cents. I might have a little bit of a strong opinion there, but it is what it is. That's who I am.
Yes, I agree. This is Roberto. I think if people are passionate, if they want to get into the interpreting field, I would definitely encourage going to an ITP. And there's IEPs, interpreter education programs that are out there. So I definitely encourage people to go to those. ITP is interpreter training programs, is what they used to be called, but IEPs out there, they are they are great. And I know that a lot of these programs are run by hearing teachers, but certainly a nice place that you could go is NTID, valued at university, just to get started out there. And I know they're designed by hearing interpreters, the curriculum, but the most important thing is that you're able to get your foot in the door. You're able to learn all the curriculum. You're understanding how hearing interpreters process the information, how they see the process of interpreting. And the great thing is if you get into a classroom, you're working with a lot of hearing interpreters. So you're understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and they're understanding their own strengths and weaknesses compared to you. So I think it's a great idea to go into an ITP.
Felicia here, not only interpreter programs, but workshops. Workshops, there's some great workshops. I think there was a program called, I think it was called Project Limb, Climb, excuse me, where deaf people got together and they did workshops, and there were scholarships that they could afford to go and do those things. Take those opportunities that come up, take workshops, training, and also register with RID, become a member, collect CEUs and document that. And so you can build your resume and your portfolio, and also show videos of yourself interpreting. I realize, when I go to workshops, I'm not documenting CEUs. I'm making sure that I don't want to waste those. I am a member of RID and I want to make sure that I'm documenting that. I can collect that. It's worth it. So it's important to take workshops, do that. If they're available, hop on it. Especially now with the virtual world,
Absolutely.
do it. Take them, do it. And get your friends to come on and expand the pool of deaf interpreters. Show that deaf people can do this and we should be doing this.
This is June. A lot of people say, "Oh, I just spent so much money on workshop and trainings." You do, yes. Maybe now it looks like you're spending a lot of money on this training, but as it comes on, you become certified. It's going to be a reinvestment in your own training and your own experiences. So, of course, you're investing now, but you're going to get that reimbursed to you. It's going to come back to you later on, just by the work that you're doing and by all the interpreting that you're doing.
Roberto, yeah, I took a course in an ITP, and it really benefited me because the design for the curriculum was 200 hours of internship, and I wanted to become a certified interpreter. It was in Texas. There were two that I had to do work, but it was really beneficial for me to go around with an interpreter and get that feedback to see where I can improve.
Yeah, this is Richie. I think when you think of, uh, work or taking all these classes and where you're going to learn how to be an interpreter, it sounds like a lot of work. And it's not fun, of course. But I think the most important thing is that when you keep in mind is that interpreting is fun. You know that at the end of the day, what you're going to be doing is a lot of fun. It's going to be worthwhile. It's going to make it worthwhile to be doing all the work to build up to that point. So, of course, you're taking all these courses that you're taking. And yeah, you're becoming an interpreter. You're learning every step of the way and you're getting in different opportunities to get to the point to where you want to go.
And if I'm interpreting something, yeah, and I have a deaf interpreter on the job, it's great. I get to see their signs, their styles, their choices in words, and I can just really
Mhm.
benefit or steal their signs. It's really great. I can, the same with hearing people and word choices. They hear somebody say something like, "Oh, I'm going to take that and use it in my work." I can do that when I'm working too, or if I'm using a CDI. It's challenging, but it is fun.
Yes. This is Richie. It's always so inspiring to see different people have their goals set and they want to become a certified interpreter, a deaf certified interpreter. I know for me, whatever their needs are, as a team, we're working together to make sure that they ensure their goals. It's a community, and it takes a community to raise an interpreter. It certainly takes a community to raise a deaf interpreter.
Yeah. Felicia here, I have to admit, when I first, started, copy signing or mirror signing, I wanted to be clear. And often I would sign and I was like, when I was done, I was like, oh my gosh, was I clear? Did I sign it right? And they were like, oh yeah, you were great. You were very clear. Yeah. And I was like, oh, great. I actually felt so good about myself. And they encouraged me to become an interpreter. And I was like, okay, I guess I can do this. And I took workshops because I started to be curious about it. And I love interpreting theater, and I just increased doing that more and more over time. And I found that passion that I have. So through language, language is so fun. You can be so creative with how it looks. You're not just limited to interpreting and copy signing, but there are some really amazing interpreting language opportunities out there that you can be so creative. But really, just when you get something from a hearing interpreter and then you turn it into something that's just beautiful, it really makes you fall into it. You really do take time to look at yourself and see how you're doing and what you're doing, and having those conversations about it and what could be done and what couldn't be done. And it's been a great experience. It's really helped me and improved me, I think.
Yeah, this is June. Sometimes a deaf person will be like, "Oh, that's not what I said. It's completely off." And you're going, "No, no, it's the same thing. It's just how I was able to take that and translate that for a hearing audience." And a deaf person's thinking that I didn't get their message, or I completely distorted their message. And I'm going, "No." So as a deaf interpreter, I have to take that. I have to say, "No, this is not." But I know what I did. I know I took their message and I was able to translate that for a hearing audience. So I say yes, but they don't. A lot of people don't understand the process of what we do as interpreters. It's a lot different in how we see the message. And yes, I got your message, but at the time when I'm interpreting, I feel like I have to depict what the person's thinking and what they're about. I really have to think about completely their whole essence and what they're thinking and their intent. And I have to take all of that and I have to depict that to somebody else and their culture and understand what they're thinking and make sure that they understand that message. So when you're interpreting, you're really in that world. And for those of you who are watching, you may think, okay, you could take any TV show and you could just see captions, right? And you're saying, like, okay, try to interpret that. Just try to interpret that and see how it is just for a minute. It's hard.
Alicia here. Yeah, I've tried that and I just get, stuck. And the community sees me, because I'm in front, but really there are moments where I just realize, oh gosh, I'm on screen and I have to be careful. But again, it's a learning experience for all of us.
Mm.
We all make mistakes, and that is true. We just do. And we just have to stay accountable and make sure that we're looking at ourselves and looking at our work that we do.
That's right. This is June. So, as a wrap up, what do we want to do? What do we want to leave everybody thinking about? What do we want? Just one thing that they're going to take home with us that's just going to impact everybody. Do you have any words that you want to leave everybody with, or any
Wow, good
thoughts?
question.
Mine is don't be afraid to use a CDI or a DI out there. So for any interpreter watching, don't be afraid to call a CDI or a DI. And for the deaf community, don't be afraid to try one. That's what I want to leave everyone with.
Felicia here. Yep, I'm on board with that. I think, my advice, just start now. Don't wait. Don't wait. Just don't put it off. Do it now. You know, the opportunities are out there. Take them. Just really get on it. If something is there, if you can afford it, do it. Find people to mentor you If they're an interpreter, say, hey, just go up to them and ask, please, do you mind mentoring me? I want to grow, and get that support that you want. So don't wait.
And this is Ritchie. Just a heads up, when you're using a deaf interpreter, it may be different, but know that we're used to hearing interpreters. And of course, there's a lot of grammatical errors, and a lot of deaf people just take those as our model. And so we really have to flip the script and know that as a deaf interpreter, we may not be used to what we're seeing, but after a while, it'll feel like, oh, this is it. Because we've been dealing with hearing interpreters who've made a lot of mistake over the years.
Roberto here. If you're using an interpreter and you feel, oh my gosh, I don't have to work as much, I can just relax and you can be yourself. That's what I want you to take away from this.
This is Felicia. Absolutely. When you see someone signing a deaf interpreter, that inspires you to become an interpreter too. That's one of the goals. We want people to see that. We have that moment, that it just feels natural. And definitely we want more people to work, and that way we can be able to work together.